Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. I figured I would tack on to the video I did the other day about different snakes that I thought were a good pick for families and go a little bit more in depth when it comes to ball pythons. I know a lot of people, a lot of average people that have never owned a snake before, when you go into a place like PetSmart or Petco, even if you go to a reptile show, you're going to see usually hatchlings, or you're going to see ball pythons that are in the early juvenile stage where they're just a few months old, under a year, and you have no idea how big these things are going to get. You have no idea, what's the maximum size enclosure you're going to need for these guys. And it can be a little bit frustrating because a lot of people do get them as hatchlings and they don't realize how big they can get, especially the females, and they don't really understand what they've gotten themselves into. So I figured today I would show you some different sizes of the different ball pythons I have, because I pretty much have from hatchling all the way to adult female breeding weight. He's over 2,000 grams. And I figured I would just give you a little bit of an insight in case this is a snake that you are potentially thinking about for you and or your family. They're a fantastic snake. I know a lot of people like to say that they are pet rocks. That is just because in the wild they burrow and they live in burrows and they stay in the dark most of the day, hidden away, and then they come out in search of prey when something scurries past their burrow. And they are nocturnal, so they are active at night, and they're just, in general, they're just not very active, and that's why a lot of people call them pet rocks. But in my experience, even though that is their reputation and they're considered by a lot of people to be boring, I still really love ball pythons, and that is a snake that we are going to actually breed here along with boa constrictors. So I obviously love ball pythons, and they come in so many fantastic, beautiful morphs. I mean, the possibilities are endless. If you go on Morph Market and look around, I mean, you're gonna find pretty much everything there is when it comes to the different colors and patterns that they can come in. So they are really popular. You're always gonna see them at reptile shows. You're always gonna see them in pet stores, and they're, the popularity is never gonna die with ball pythons. I will definitely tell you that. That was Zero there. That's my little Decker Rat Terrier. He's with me all the time, so you might see him in some videos periodically. But yeah, I'm gonna go upstairs because our room that we actually have our ball pythons in is upstairs, and the reason that we keep them upstairs is because, and this is another reason why people complain about ball pythons as pets, is the fact that they can be picky eaters. It can be a little bit of a struggle to deal with them when they are supposed to be eating and they don't want to, and you can't seem to figure out why. They can be picky about different types of prey you offer them. They can be, the temperature's not right for them, or if they don't have enough hides, they don't feel secure enough, or if there's, a lot of stress going on, if you've got your tank in an area where it's really, really loud and there's just a lot of things going on that stress them out, that can actually cause them to stop eating. There are different ways to house ball pythons. I will show you the rack method, which is primarily used for when you're breeding, because you just have such a high number of snakes at one time and you need an efficient way to keep and care for them. And then I will show you a lot of the vivariums that we have, which, in other words, you could call them tanks, you could call them terrariums, you could call them cages. I hear some people call them cages, but I will give you the pros and cons of each of those options so that you can decide what you would rather do. I will also be going through the temperament and how to sort of handle if you're going through an issue where, okay, you've got your ball python, it's being a little bit nippy and it doesn't trust you and you're having issues being able to handle it. I'm going to go through all of that as well and kind of give you a little bit of insight on my experiences and what to expect, especially depending on the age that you end up getting your ball python at. A lot of times when you get a hatchling, it can be a lot different than getting an adult or sub-adult. So we're going to go through that too. Okay everybody, so the first thing that I would like to talk about when it comes to ball pythons is housing. What you're looking at right now is you are looking at a vivarium, in other words, terrarium, tank, cage, whatever you would like to call it. This is an Exoterra large low. It is about 3 feet long in length, and it's about 1 foot tall, and it's a little over a foot in width. So it's got a screen top. It's got these nice front opening doors right here. That little piece just came with it. I don't really understand what it's for, unless it's just an extra barrier method, but you open the front doors, and this is ideal for every snake with the front opening doors, because you come from the side when you are going to handle your snake and get them out. You're not coming from the top, which they can associate that with thinking you're a predator. So I always would rather have the front opening doors, but sometimes you can't find those. As you can see here, I have a water dish. You need a water dish, preferably that is at least from when they're babies to when they're juveniles, that they can actually get inside. I've got a cool hide over here, which Lucian is in there. He's our blue-eyed leucistic ball python. He's in the cool side right now, and I've got some cork bark. I've got another little hide in the middle. He's got another log back here, and his warm hide, which is over here to the left. You want a temperature gradient in the middle between like 80 to 82 degrees usually. Your hot spot inside your hide, where your heat mat is going to be underneath the glass, is going to be at about 90 degrees. You want to keep it there. I actually painted the outside of the glass on each side, as you can see, to make it feel more secure in here, because it does already come with a background if you did get this one. This tank runs close to $200, if not a little bit over $200. I think I got it on sale at PetSmart. But this is a fantastic decision when it comes to your first ball python, something they can really live in for a while, especially males. This is not considered to be a 40 gallon just because of the height difference. It's a little bit shorter, but the floor space is the same as a 40 gallon. So a male could live in here for a long time. A female would need a slightly bigger. People say, gosh, keep them in something way bigger than a 40. You'll come across a lot of different opinions on this if you go on YouTube and you search. Some people say, oh, well, you can keep even a female in a 40 for their whole lives, or some people be like, no, you need a 60 gallon, you need a 75 gallon. Like, there's all kinds of opinions on this, but I encourage you to go do your own research on that so that you can decide what's best for you. Obviously, if you have a hatchling, a lot of people recommend starting at a hatchling in a 10, 15, or 20 gallon, just because it feels more secure for them, and you can have a lot of issues with them eating if they don't feel secure, which we've had issues with before, so I can tell you from experience, it is better to start babies off in something smaller when it comes to ball pythons. As far as substrate, a lot of people will use cocoa husk, a lot of people will use cypress mulch. This is actually in here a blend of cypress mulch and eco earth, which is basically really finely ground coconut fiber, so it's sort of a mixture. The cypress mulch I usually get is forest floor, and then the eco earth is basically the really finely ground coconut fiber. That's the brand name for that at many pet stores. So in addition to all the different places he has to hide in here, he's got all these different plants. The main thing for ball pythons is you want to provide a lot of cover. You know, these are animals that when they're out in the wild, most of the time during the day, they're hiding. And they live in burrows, they live in termite mounds, places like that. They want to feel secure. So that's the main thing, is you don't want them to feel like they're exposed. So provide plenty of hides on the warm and the cool side. Provide plenty of plants. Provide the right substrate, give them a water dish that they can easily access, that they can get in and out of, especially when they're babies and juveniles. Sometimes when your ball python becomes full grown, you might not be able to find a water dish that's big enough for them to fully submerge in. But, you know, if you're not able to do that, you can always go to the pet store and you can get just a dog food bowl or dog water bowl that's big enough. You can do that. But just make sure that you have the basics. And remember, your heat pad, your heat mat needs to be stuck to the bottom of the glass, never inside the actual enclosure. And we're going to talk about thermostats in a second, but your thermostat probe needs to be sandwiched in between the bottom of the glass and the heat mat, which is stuck to the glass. You don't want to put your probe inside because it can move around and then you're going to get inaccurate readings. Your ball python could pee on it, damage the thermostat probe. And so you want to make sure that all of your heating equipment is put in the right place, and you don't want your ball pythons to get a really nasty burn, which can happen, and we're going to talk about that in a second when it comes to your thermostat settings. When it comes to heating your tank, you've got some options. Some people will strictly use a heat lamp. They won't use a heat pad. For me, when it comes to how my house is, I have to use a lamp and a heat pad to maintain proper ambient temperatures and temperatures on the bottom of the tank for belly heat. So during the day, I just use a 60 watt day heat bulb, and then at night I have this CHE over here that I flip around and use, and it emits heat. It doesn't emit light. There are people that argue do not ever use light for ball pythons, only use a CHE that emits no light because they say that lights stress them out. Well, you can say that, you can argue that, but in the wild, every animal experiences some form of a natural day and night cycle. So that's why I do use a day lamp during the day, and then at night I use a CHE. And he has plenty of places to hide, so it's not like he's just sitting out here directly in the light. He has plenty of dark places to hide in the enclosure. So for me personally, using lights is not an issue. You don't have to use a day heat lamp. You can just use a CHE, or you can only use a heat mat if you don't need to use a heat bulb up top to maintain your ambient temperatures. But that's just what I do, and that's what works for me. We're going to talk about thermostats. This is a thermostat I ordered off of Amazon. It's set to 94. I know that I said the hot spot is supposed to be 90. It is. The reason that this thermostat is set to 94 is because you have to account for the glass and the substrate that the heat has to pass through from the heat mat to the actual snake. So that's why it's set to 94, because it takes 94 degrees on the bottom of the tank where the heat mat is touching the glass to be able to actually have the temperature to be 90 degrees inside of his hide on top of the glass and the substrate. Really need one of these, because if you don't have one of these, you can run the risk of your heat mat getting way too hot and giving your snake a really nasty burn, which is not good at all. And it can also cause things in your house to burn. So you really want to invest in the thermostat. There are plenty of them on Amazon. There are plenty of them that you can find at reptile shows and in pet stores. Temperatures will fluctuate a bit, so I would play with the temperature, and I would definitely use your infrared temp gun to check and make sure that that hot spot is 90 degrees. Because you know that for different enclosures in different situations, you're going to have this set to different, 92, 90, 91, 93. Because like I said, you have to account for that heat passing up through the material of the enclosure and the substrate to be able to have that actual 90 degree hot spot. Another thing that you'll need is a humidity gauge. Now right here, the bigger number is telling you the humidity percentage that's in the enclosure, and then the upper corner is telling you the temperature. So this actually acts as a humidity gauge plus a thermometer, and I have these on Velcro. You can get some Velcro at Walmart, so that way if this does come off, it's Velcro, so it's not going to harm the snake. Python humidity, typically people say 50 to 60% at all times. When they are in the shed cycle, you want it to be between 70 and 80 from my experience, so that your snake will actually have a good shed. The challenge with a lot of those glass tanks and terrariums, because the top is screen and you don't have a way to really keep in the humidity. So I actually like to use a damp towel on one side of the top of the enclosure to cover it and help keep the humidity in. I use a spray bottle with some water in it, and I actually mist that down every day, at least twice a day. And I also mist inside the enclosure to keep my humidity where it needs to be. This over here is a standard 40-gallon enclosure. It has the same exact dimensions as the Exoterra Large Low I just showed you, but it's taller. It's about twice as tall as the Exoterra Large Low. And same things apply, except for this one. This one actually came from PetSmart, around the same price as the other one, around $200. This one has a drawer that pulls out where the substrate is. You can actually clean the tank out easier that way. But because there's this plastic drawer right here, the glass bottom is actually underneath where this plastic drawer slides out. So you actually have to have your thermostat set to a couple degrees higher than the one on the Exoterra Large Low to achieve 90 degrees inside the hide. So this thermostat It's the same thermostat that I have over there, but it's set to 96 because the heat has to pass through the glass on the bottom, the plastic bottom of the drawer, the substrate to get to the snake. If you want to do the tub route, but you don't want to deal with a snake rack, you don't want to deal with the expenses, you can buy something like this. This is a 66 quart tub from Target. It was $17.99. It's got the latches on all four sides. I would highly recommend getting a tub with the latches on all four sides because that ensures that your snake will not get out. You need to make sure that you have plenty of air holes on all sides. But if you lift this up, you've got basically the essentials. You've got a water bowl, you've got some plants, you've got your substrate, you've got your hide. We use paper towels, especially in these plastic tubs, because the bottom of these tubs where the heat mat is going to be on the warm side can get really hot, and we don't want to risk an accidental burn in case our thermostat fails. So we like to use paper towels underneath the substrate when it comes to plastic tubs. Now, if you decide to go the route of a snake rack, you can find a lot of these already made at reptile shows. You can also find them online if you want to order them there, or you can build your own. There's actually ways that you can build your own if you would like to. But I'm basically going to pull one out and just kind of show you. These are like 41 quart adult tubs. You can keep up to adult females in here. Some people argue though they need a bigger one, but these are fine, honestly, in my opinion. This is a 5 tub adult rack, so you can keep up to 5 snakes in here. Obviously, same thing sort of with the other ones. You just want to have your water bowl, you want to have your substrate. You may or may not want to provide a hide or some plants in there. Sometimes snakes are a little bit too big to fit inside certain hides that would even fit in here. Sometimes you do have to go without a hide, but same rule of thumb, cool side, warm side, same temperature differences when it comes to the tubs versus the enclosures. And this is just another efficient way that breeders a lot of the times will keep ball pythons, because it allows you to keep a higher number of ball pythons and clean and care for them efficiently. So this in my hand is about the size of a hatchling. She might be a little bit bigger than a hatchling. She's a baby. She's our super pastel desert ghost female. Her name is Soul. We've had her for, gosh, maybe 2 or 3 weeks now. She just ate her first meal with us. We wanted to try her out on frozen thawed, but unfortunately we had to go to live because she would not eat frozen thawed. We think she's still been on live from where we got her. So we had to do live for her. So she ate 2 days ago. So she's good to go. And this is about the size that you'll see them a lot of the times at reptile shows and in pet stores. So of course you're probably going to be like, that's pretty little. It's not going to get that big, right? Look at how little it is starting out. So you're naturally going to think you don't really need a big enclosure eventually, and you're just going to think that this is not going to get very big. This is about how small they start out. She, when we first got her, was a little bit nippy. I'm not sure if she'll kind of display any of that for us today, but I wanted to bring up the point that a lot of hatchlings can have that temperament when they first hatch out because they don't know what humans are. They don't trust you. They think you're a predator, and that's their natural instinctual reaction when they come out of the egg. It doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that you have to get your snake used to you and acclimated to the environment. But this is, again, an example of pretty much a hatchling. So we'll set her right here. I'm going to get Sulian out if I can open this. All right. So on the right, we've got Sulian. On the left, we've got Soul that I just showed you. This is an example of a hatchling versus a juvenile or subadult male. So this is basically the difference between what you're going to see at a pet store or a reptile show on the left most of the time versus one that's just about full grown. So he's a little bit over a year. He's pushing 500 grams right now, and he's a male, so keep in mind he will stay a little bit on the smaller side compared to females, but you can see like that is a huge difference right there. just in a hatchling versus a juvenile. When it comes to a snake like Sulian here, he has had plenty of experience with people. He has a very, very good, mellow, sweet temperament. He does get a little bit shy at times, as you can see him trying to kind of hide his head. But once he comes out, he is an explorer and he loves to be handled. Here is Zahara. She is just over 800 grams now, so she's a little bit bigger. Well, she's actually a few hundred grams bigger than Sulian, but this is a female, so you can start to kind of see how big the females will be compared to the males. There are males that are this size too, but this is about close to adult weight pretty much for a female, and it's not huge, but it's definitely not as small as that hatchling I showed you or as small as Sulian. So I'm going to try to get a different shot of her so you can actually see her whole body. Alright, so here's another shot of her. Hopefully you can see her a little bit better, see a little bit better how big she is, but she is definitely a pretty good size right there. She is, like I said, just over 800 grams, so she's got some good size on her. We've been feeding her one small rat a week, so she is a growing girl, as you can see. We're going to go ahead and put her back, and then we're going to show you Lucian, and then we're going to show you Priya, our biggest ball python we have. Okay, everybody, so I promised I would get Lucian out. He is close to the same size as Sulian, so he's another good example of a juvenile male ball python. So he is the one that we have over there living in the Exoterra large low. He is a butter Mojave blue-eyed leucistic, if anybody wanted to know his genetics, and he came from Wilbanks. Highly recommend them over there. He was our first snake that we got, so he's the one that started it all. So everybody loves Lucian. He's kind of like our little Magic City Morphs mascot, but he is gaining some weight, but he has not wanted to eat for the past week or two. He has hunger strikes that he goes on sometimes, so that is another example of how sometimes they just decide they don't want to eat. Sometimes there's reasons, there's direct reasons for it. Sometimes they might be going into a shed cycle, which means they don't want to eat sometimes. Other times, they can just be picky. But I would definitely, if you're having an issue with a ball python that doesn't seem like it wants to eat, I would try your husbandry. I would look at all that, look at your temperatures, make sure that all that's good to go and where it needs to be. And then if you're still having some issues, you might need to resort to going to live if you've been doing frozen thaw, because sometimes that's just what we have to do when we need to get our snakes to eat. Like I said, that's what we had to do for Sol, because she's a tiny baby and she did not want to take frozen thawed. So keep in mind that might be something that you have to do. But other than them being sort of picky eaters sometimes, they usually really, there's nothing negative, honestly. Aren't very active, like I said, but once you get them out, they usually like to be pretty active when you're handling them. So I highly recommend ball pythons because they have a fantastic temperament. I call them the kittens of the snake world, if that gives you any sort of comparison. But Lucian here is a really beautiful snake, and like I said, he was our first one. We adore him, and we really hope to make some more little Lucians one day, so be on the lookout for that. Okay guys, so this is Priya. She is our adult female lesser cinnamon ball python. She's the biggest one we have. She's over 2,000 grams, and she's about 4 to 4.5 feet long, fully stretched out. As you can see, she's a pretty big girl. The biggest part of her body is about as big as my upper arm, so that gives you a little bit of perspective. This girl right here would need something honestly bigger than what Lucian is in, which I talked about him a minute ago being in the Exoterra large low. So she would need something a little bit bigger so she would have plenty of room. But this is typically, you typically don't see them this big at pet stores and things like that. So keep in mind that this is how big they can get, especially the females. I have seen some males get pretty big, but she has a very fantastic temperament. The only thing I've ever really had happen with her is sometimes she would hiss when I needed to get her out and clean her tub or anything like that. And that's just them being in a bad mood. It means they really don't want you to mess with them, but she has never struck at me. So Honestly, really hatchling ball pythons can have a little bit of a nippy attitude. Sometimes adults can if they've never been handled by people. I have heard people say that there are ball pythons that just are grumpy all the time and that's their personality, and I'm sure that does happen sometimes because every snake is different. But as far as my ball pythons that I have, I really don't have an issue with any of them. The only one that was a little bit questionable was Nala. When we first got her, she was already a year old when we got her, and she hadn't really had any experience with people. But very quickly after we had been handling her, she got very used to people and she trusts people now. So that shows you right there that it doesn't take very long at all for ball pythons to get acclimated to you. But I highly recommend ball pythons as pretty much the perfect, I wouldn't say perfect because there are a lot of other great snakes out there as well, but as far as temperament goes, if you're talking about little kids being around snakes, I definitely think ball pythons are the way to go for your first snake, because like I said when I talked about king snakes, king snakes are beginner snakes too, but they have a huge appetite, they're very food driven, and that can become a problem. Now, ball pythons are not food driven. Like I said, a lot of people have issues with them being picky eaters sometimes, so usually when you're dealing with a snake that's not very food driven, it has a very good temperament to be around children. Now, you always want to be present when you have any type of animal like this around a child, because you know, not only could an accident happen where maybe the child does something unknowingly to upset the snake, but also the child could actually hurt the snake too. So as the parent, you want to do your research, you want to really be hands-on and the leader in all of this when it comes to deciding to bring a snake into your family. You want to really educate yourself, your spouse, your children, make sure that everybody's on board and comfortable with the idea. And then when it comes to handling and care, you want to make sure that you're very, very well equipped for that and ready for that. And you can start teaching your children when they get a little bit older, when they're not around like the toddler age and the, you know, really young age like that. I would say probably between 7 and 10, you could start teaching them about how to approach the snake in its enclosure, how to remove the snake from the enclosure, how to handle things like that. I have seen people let babies lay ball pythons on top of babies and let little toddlers handle ball pythons. I'm not going to really comment on that because I have my own opinions on that when it comes to kids that are that small with a snake that can get this big. But everybody has, you know, their own morals, their own views, their own things that they are comfortable with or that they're not comfortable with. So I would encourage you just to make sure that you do your research, you do your homework, and you know what you're getting into with these animals. But they make fantastic pets. And a lot of those other snakes I showed you make fantastic family pet snakes too. Some of those others are just actually more food driven, so that can be an issue if someone does the wrong thing. If you do your homework, and like I said with the other snakes I mentioned, the bigger snakes like boa constrictors and reticulated pythons, if you do the tap training and you really teach them when it's time to eat, when it's not time to eat, when it's time to handle, you will be a-okay. Ball pythons are definitely one of my top recommendations for a snake that you should choose for your family.